morning, everyone. Welcome to Old Colony Planning Council's webinar on outdoor dining and retail while social distancing. My name is Joanne Zigmund, and I'm the Senior Comprehensive Planner at OCPC. For the next hour, I'll be facilitating this webinar. Folks on this webinar are all muted. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, so if you would like to not be seen, make sure to turn your video off. If you're having technical issues, we recommend that you rejoin the webinar via telephone or watch the recording of this webinar later. Slides are going to be shared with you later this afternoon. The recording will be emailed to everybody tomorrow. This is OCP's second webinar, and we intend to do more of these in future. It's only with your feedback that we're able to improve. So if you'd please take 2 minutes at the end of the webinar to complete the survey at the end, we'd really appreciate that, and thank you in advance. There will be time at the end for questions and answers. The easiest way to ask is to submit a question using the Q&A feature in Zoom. If you dialed in by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand, and I'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask a question. If you don't get the chance to have your question answered today, or if you think of questions later, contact us at OCPC at any time. Paul, who will be sharing his contact details later, will be available. And you can always just go to our website as well for additional information. So those are all the boring details. With that, I'd now like to turn it over to my colleague, Paul Chenard, who is the Senior Transportation Planner at Old Colony Planning Council. Paul?
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate that. So I just want to go ahead and just kind of run a quick tour of the agenda that we're going to be embarking upon today. I'll be talking about the business and social distance design guide you're about to see and the reason why we are here today. And then we will be hearing from our panelists and their respective experiences in regards to social distancing in business, whether it be on the Commonwealth level with Fichter, on the town level with Mr. Lee Hartmann, Director of Planning and Development for the Town of Plymouth, and from a business side, which is very poignant at this time because so much of it is going to affect business. From Mr. Mark Minsky, the manager of Easton Country Club. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you get some valuable information from there, and we're here to help you out. All right, next slide, please. So here's some additional information for you where you can download the actual design guide for yourself and also some accompanying examples of permits and policies your town can use in order to help facilitate outdoor dining and business usage in the public right of way or in other non-traditional business or outdoor dining spots, and additional information regarding COVID-19 and the Old Colony Planning Council region overall. Next slide, please. So we're going to start today by talking about each design element, and the first is temporarily expanded sidewalks. So a temporarily expanded sidewalk is pretty much what it sounds like, is expanding the public sidewalk into the roadway or into other non-traditional spaces that would not have been a sidewalk before COVID-19. For example, like public on-street public parking spaces. And this is to facilitate one or two things. One, to give people adequate distance so they can socially distance when walking and jogging out in the community. Also provides additional space for outdoor dining as well, because the dining could go ahead and take place in the parking lot, not the parking lot, in the parking spaces on street, and then still provide enough room for the public to move around on the sidewalk. I mean, some of these can be achieved by just simply putting cones out into the right of way, as you see in the picture there, or using more robust safety devices such as jersey barriers or the orange water-filled barriers, which look like jersey barriers, to achieve that safety precaution and to delineate the space between what is for automobiles and what is for pedestrians and business goers. Next slide, please. So the next one I really want to dive into is the parklet. The parklet has a history of really some what I call guerrilla urban planning from back in the day, was to reclaim on-street parking spots and repurpose them for everyday use for the general public as outdoor recreational areas, or i.e. parks, hence the name parklet, and really comes out of the parklet idea of taking back the street for non-automobile use. And this is a real critical piece in the design guide, because it provides an outdoor dining space or an outdoor retail space for regional businesses, because that 7 by 14 foot parking space is anywhere from 140 square feet to even 320 square feet of space in an off-street parking spot. So it provides a restaurant or retail business a lot of space to conduct their commerce in the outdoors while maintaining social distancing. And the benefits of having these parklets in this outdoor dining experience, along with outdoor retailing, is that you're in constant fresh air. And that is a huge benefit when it comes to reducing the transmission of virus, because the air is in constant circulation when you're outside, which greatly reduces your chances of transmission. Doesn't eliminate them, obviously, but doing your business outdoors greatly reduces your risk of transferring COVID-19 between patrons. And then also it's extremely inviting to be outdoors, as anyone has ever dined outside as well. So, I mean, it really puts greater safety into your business. It also showcases your business as well, because everyone's been cooped up inside the house. So people are starting to get out, and you want your business front and center, and you want to display your craft, whether it be, you know, your fine dining experience or your boutique clothing. This really gets business community out there, provides a nice space for people to enjoy themselves outdoors, and maintains all the elements that have been put forth in by the Commonwealth in regards to opening up business in the Commonwealth going forward. So the next slide, please. Another example of a temporary use is a temporary bike lane or a shared path. So what this does is that you would be allocating space in the public right away. For example, maybe you don't need to expand your sidewalk, but what you could do is you could repurpose that parking lane or that extra travel lane that you may have in your community and transition it to a bike lane or a shared use path. And that way you provide opportunity for your residents to get out, enjoy fresh air, to cycle around or to walk around your community, which is also good for local businesses as well, because you're exposing your residents to the local offerings in your community centers or your commercial zones, and really getting people out and about, and which is also really good for for mental health at this time, since everyone's been cooped up for so long. And it's also a great way to trial shared use paths or bike lanes in your communities that you have been thinking about doing, but have yet not decided to do so. So this is a great dry run to seeing how that works in regards to your communities. And seeing if maybe at one point after the temporary design has taken its course, see if maybe these designs need to become permanent. So this can be achieved in a number of ways by simply putting out cones and potted flowers, like as you see in the pictorial example there, or using things like Jersey barriers, sawhorses, or some type of barrier to delineate the space from automobile traffic. And that way cyclists and pedestrians can get out and use what would have been traditionally parking or automobile travel lane too. And as I'm sure many of you know, there's been a bicycle purchasing boom this summer. It's extremely hard to get a bicycle if you're looking for one. So that means all our residents are newly bicycle owners. So they're going to want to get out and ride these bikes. And this is a good way to provide them a safe means to do so. Next slide, please. So another concept I wanted to bring to your attention is the open street concept. For those who may not be familiar with open streets, I mean, a lot of us have been doing it for years, just not under the open streets name. And that's what we call a block party. And what it really just is taking a street, either reducing it, reducing the access to automobiles by, as you can see here, dividing up the space with some type of planters or other device that's going to separate automobile traffic from pedestrian, bicycle, and retail transactions, or even just simply maybe just shutting down the street during certain times of the day or certain days of the week in order to facilitate outdoor dining, retailing, and also active transportation uses as well. So this really provides a lot of space for people to be outdoors, maintaining that social distancing of 6 feet, or as my friend from Peru said, one llama's worth of distance between individuals. And it just creates a really, festive atmosphere. Once again, showcasing your business, showcasing retail and dining opportunities, and also allowing people to get that fresh air, which is just going to be so good for mental health since everyone's been cooped up for so long. Next slide, please. So in the next couple of slides, you're going to see things to consider in regards to your design. For example, design considerations and how they will help you facilitate your temporary design, and maybe even actually at the end of that temporary design trial period, seeing how you can make them permanent. So for things like, if you need to lower speed limits, ideas of restricting roadways, plans to collect data so you can set some key performance indicators to see how your temporary design is doing, so that we have some actual data points you can use to make a case and whether or not a design should become permanent. Next slide, please. Also some public safety considerations. So, talking to your municipal safety services like fire, EMS, and police, and seeing how you guys can coordinate in order to make these temporary designs a success. Next slide, please. Things to consider like stakeholder engagement and public engagement. So talking to your political officials, whether they be your city council or board of selectmen, talking to your business community, which is really going to be key in order to get their buy-in and show them the benefits of installing temporary designs and how it can help them facilitate commerce on their end, and also getting the public on board, because all of a sudden parking is gone or traveling is gone, they're going to want to know what's going on. So if you start engaging them early and start basically informing people about what you're trying to do, this is going to make your temporary design a lot more welcomed. Next slide, please. Also, another thing to consider is if you have public transportation. For example, like the town of Plymouth has GATRA in its service area, so you want to engage your public transit authorities. Brockton has the Brockton Area Transit Authority, so when you guys are setting up temporary designs, you guys can work together to properly site bus stops or to accommodate the alighting and boarding of buses at those locations where temporary designs might be placed. Next slide, please. As we see, we engage the business community. Local chambers of commerce would be a great way to engage many businesses at once, because the local chamber of commerce is your representative to your business community. The business community can also be a great place to find additional funding in order to maintain or to set up these temporary designs, which will be key to have somebody to look after and maintain them as they're in use for the rest of the summer. Next slide, please. Engaging your public works in the maintenance and the setup of the design element. Next slide, please. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at the number of email there below. We can help you design and set up such temporary design element. If you have questions, we'd be more than happy to talk to you more about what those questions are and find you solutions of. We're offering technical assistance for all our communities in setting up their temporary designs or ideas about temporary designs. And I thank you for being a part of this webinar. And I'm going to transition now to the Director of Planning and Economic Development, Mr. Lee Hartmann, and he's going to talk about the municipal experience in regards to social distancing in business and retail. Lee?
All right, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So it's very interesting that we did not share, or you did not share this presentation with me beforehand. But as you see, some of the points I'll make today, we really kind of touch on many. You'll see some common themes between what Paul just presented and what I'm going to present. So I first would start off by saying Plymouth's tourism is our #1 industry in Plymouth, and we rely very heavily on tourism. And not surprisingly, because of COVID and the situation we're in, we're expecting to see some significant shortfalls and decrease of visitors in Plymouth. And ironically, this is our 400th anniversary. We were actually expecting more visitors than ever, and we'll actually see a situation where we have fewer visitors than what we would normally expect on a summer day. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I try to remind people all the time, is that many businesses in our community are in a crisis mode. And we have to keep in mind that they're functioning in what I would call a crisis mode right now because of their loss of revenue and the situation we're in. So it's a challenge. And the other thing I've heard out there across the country is we could be expecting about 40% of the small businesses we have in our communities not to survive this situation. So there is going to be a lot of upheaval and a lot of changes that come because of this. The other point I wanted to kind of start with too is I've been in planning, I don't want to admit it, but now for 34 years at the municipal level with actually mostly Plymouth. But one of my observations is as planners, as municipal officials, we like to take a cautious, methodical approach. And I think my message for this situation we're in is now's not the time to be taking that cautious, methodical approach. And now I'll talk a little bit about what Plymouth has done and some of the keys to our success. So the first thing is that from day one, we've been very involved with the business community. I'd like to commend the Plymouth Area Chamber of Commerce. They've created a group called Plymouth Recovery. We're actually meeting again today at 3. And it's a group of business owners. It's a group of town officials who have been meeting regularly for a few months now to talk about the challenges that the business community has. And as part of that, they've done a very good job of polling local businesses and local residents to see what works and doesn't work. And then my final comment on what's a key to success is that the Board of Selectmen and the town manager in Plymouth have set a tone that says that we need to make this happen. And so again, as I go back to the bureaucratic side where we all have a tendency to try to be slow, raise questions, look at the barriers, the message from the top down has been very clear, make this happen. And so that's really helped us look at different things. When we look at what we're doing in Plymouth right now, we have really started what I'd call just a graduated process into this. So the first thing we looked at was private property, businesses that are on malls or plazas or on private property. And we very quickly have said, look, if you want to do outdoor seating, outdoor sales of merchandise within your parking lot, you have a reduced capacity already because of the governor's requirements. So there's no issue with zoning. So we have a very simplified process that if you're on private property, if you're in a plaza, or you have your own private parking, it's a fairly simple process. Make sure that you're meeting code with any tent, electrical wiring, Board of Health codes, but there's really no issue at all about putting up a tent, putting outdoor seating in, outdoor shopping areas in on that private property. The second thing we looked at was public sidewalks, and the main focus there is really our downtown area, North Plymouth. And so again, the selectmen set a tone to say, we're going to expedite this. They held a series of special meetings so we could do this early on as soon as the governor authorized the use of outdoor seating for restaurants. And so it's a fairly simple process that you go through with the selectmen. And right now, if you look at downtown Plymouth, we have a number of restaurants that have their outdoor seating right now, and it's working very well. The next step we have, and we're in the process of doing that now, is looking at one-way traffic flow through the downtown. And so what that will involve is 2 walking lanes where the parking is, eliminating the on-street parking, having one-way directional flow going south, and opening up the sidewalk to more ability to have additional seating and additional outdoor shopping in those sidewalk areas, placing the walkways through where the parking was, and then having the one-way traffic flow. So not sure how that's going to work out. We're in the process right now of planning and implementing that. I think next week is when we'll start to see that happening. Again, a key to success, the Plymouth Area Chamber of Commerce was able to get the safety barriers that we need to run along the street donated to the town, so we didn't have to worry about the expense of that. And again, I'll report back maybe next week to let you know how that is working. The final thing that people have talked about, and again, to kind of Paul's comment, we've been talking, the town has been talking about one-way traffic flows probably back into the 1970s, and we've never done anything about it. So this gave us an opportunity to try something different, and we'll see how it works. The final thing that's been discussed is the closing of streets, and we're not really close to even talking about closing down Court Street or Main Street. It poses a lot of problems. It eliminates all of the on-street parking. It eliminates the ability to get to many of the larger public parking lots in the town of Plymouth. Any person who has limited mobility, it's a problem. It's a problem for any of the businesses that choose or wish to still have curbside pickup. So there are a lot of challenges to looking at having a downtown street closed, and we're not quite ready to do that. And whether it's the closing of downtown or the one-way traffic flow with the movement of the sidewalk, there are other challenges that we have to deal with and we're dealing with, which is the ADA laws, the curbside pickup and making sure you have the ability to still have that occur, the loss of parking. And again, my message is you're never going to please everyone. And through this whole process with every option we've talked about, there are a number of people who are really happy and encouraging us to do it. And then there are a number of people who are adamantly opposed to the options for one reason or another. So again, it's difficult. And I would say that we've seen some very, very upset people. Just a couple comments about tents and how tenting works, whether it's on private or public property. If it's open air, it's treated as more of an outside. If the tent has sides on it, it's treated more like a building. So as people think about what they may or may not do with tents, the sides do pose a little bit more of a challenge than an open air tent. And the same thing if you have outdoor seating with umbrellas, it's open air and less restrictions than if you have some kind of enclosed outdoor area. And so just a couple of thoughts before I close. Again, I think one of my professors way back in grad school said, every problem is an opportunity. And I think that's the way we have to look at COVID and what we're in now, that we have to look at this as an opportunity, to, as Paul had mentioned, to try some things different and you know, look at things differently, and a good chance to experiment. And the other thing I've always said too is, as a society, we tend to be crisis oriented. And during crisis is when things tend to seem to happen more than when we're in more of a safe, normal mode. So I've always said that just never waste a good crisis. And this is a crisis we have where it gives us an opportunity, again, to try things differently. And then just a couple other kind of personal thoughts about this. One of the things that I always think back to is the 9/11 and how we all, or at least you had the feeling that we were all pulling towards a common good. And there was a sense of everybody working together. Kind of noticed now that we have a third of the people that I'm dealing with are very scared about everything. A third of the people are very angry. And if you'd like, I'd love to share sometime, there are rated some of the phone calls and messages that are being left on town officials' phones. Very, very mean, very angry people who are out there. And then fortunately, there's a third of people who are going with the flow, understand the challenges, and are being very flexible. But again, it's a little interesting, a little different than what I expected to see. I thought it would be like a blizzard where you're shoveling out your neighbor's driveway and working together. And I really don't see that. I do see that there is a group of people out there who are just very, very angry. And then my final comment more on the planning side about this for Plymouth is that, as I mentioned earlier, where we think we might see number of commercial entities in the downtown fail and go out of business, I'm always concerned that we will have a balance tipped in downtown Plymouth where it becomes more residential than it is commercial. So not so much now or next year, but in the future, my other big concern is that we have seen already, and I hope this doesn't make it faster, that a number of our commercial buildings in Plymouth are being converted to residential uses. A mix is a very healthy thing to have, but again, I've always been concerned that more and more, if they start to tip towards residential, we could quickly change the fabric of our downtown and change it from a tourist destination to more of a living residential community. So it's another thing that we will be looking at and monitoring as we crawl out of COVID and start to get to a more normal situation in the town. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the other speakers.
Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for giving us that perspective from the municipal side, because it's, you know, it's such an important piece of the equation because everything has to go through local government. And it's interesting for the other towns and for myself as one of your regional planners to hear the challenge that you're facing, hearing about the success, and it just helps us. It just provides a clearer vision of what we need to do and how we can go about, you know, planning for success and planning for our region to rebound, which I have great faith is going to happen. And I have great faith in Plymouth as well, because it's such a beautiful town that it's going to see far brighter, better days in the coming months ahead. And now I would like to switch to Kate Fichter. She's our Commonwealth liaison from MassDOT. She is actually the Assistant Secretary of Policy and Coordination for MassDOT. So we have quite the resource here. And today she's going to talk about our about the Commonwealth Shared Streets grant program, which is really here to help you from the Commonwealth side get your communities back up and running through temporary design initiatives to promote business and commerce. So I'm very happy to have her, and I thank you for your time, Kate. And we look forward to hear more about this this grant program.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, everybody. I'm actually going to echo what Lee said and say that it's amazing that we actually didn't coordinate in advance, because these are some of the best aligned presentations I think I've ever seen. So what is happening at MassDOT is that we have established a short-term grant program to assist municipalities in conceiving, designing, implementing projects of exactly the type that Paul and Lee discussed. Going back, right to the beginning of COVID, we were talking a lot about what we could do at the state level to try to be helpful, to try to engage on a lot of these issues. And we, like everybody, were kind of watching some of the things that were going on around the world with streetscape changes and, bicycling and pedestrian and the real emphasis on retail and dining. And we couldn't right away kind of figure out what role we had to play, since there's relatively so few roads that MassDOT owns that kind of fit the right profile. So after a fair amount of thinking, we decided to establish a new grant program modeled in some ways on our Complete Streets program, which I hope a lot of folks on this call are familiar with in one way or the other. As I say, it rolled out on Thursday. We have a website. I'm more than happy to share all of the information. But essentially, the program exists to support these projects, to particularly support projects that can be built very quickly. And I think emphasizing some of what Paul said, that we're looking for quick and readily available materials. These are not big, expensive projects. We're not looking to move curbs. We're looking to use temporary stanchions and fences and jersey barriers with water, whatever works and whatever is safe and whatever is okay for a municipality. Some of these projects may ultimately become permanent if they're popular and if they work well, but at least in the immediate, we're looking for things that can be up and running really quickly, to meet the need that's out there today and to take advantage of the weather while we have it, and to really try to help particularly dining and businesses, which, as we know, are sort of in the beginnings of the opening phases but are going to need outdoor space to do what they want to do and what they need to do, and a lot of them don't have it naturally. So it's trying to figure out how we can use existing public space to, to make some of those things possible. I had my first outdoor meal last week in Boston, and it was really quite amazing to be able to do that again. And I really hope that can be in all 351 cities and towns, because it's something I think we all need, as Paul said, after being cooped up for so long. One last thing I wanted to mention, for our grant program, applications have to be led and submitted by a municipality. We really thought it was important to have the municipal partnership and to be working with the entity that is, by and large, the owner of the infrastructure that's in question. Our partners at Mass Development, however, have a different grant program that will be coming online, I believe, next week, that is specifically focused on non-municipal entities. So that would be something that potentially civic organizations, stores, businesses could take advantage of. And we'll be working those two programs in synergy to kind of direct people to the right source. So I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. Otherwise, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate your time and giving us that information. This is going to be a valuable resource for our communities in the region overall, to getting us back to business and getting us outdoors and having a great time. Thank you. So now I'd like to move on to Mr. Mark Minsky, manager of East End Country Club. And really, I would like to take and hear his thoughts and his experiences thus far in regards to reopening the Commonwealth, his thoughts and experiences of engaging his local municipal community, and also to plug his country club. I heard he's some of the greenest greens out there for golfing. So if you can just give us some insight in your experience and how things are going, and what positives and what negatives you may have come across. We would like to hear about that. And if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, we'd like to hear more.
Oh, Mark, we can't hear you. You need to unmute your button.
How's
There
that?
you go.
Oh, we're good now?
We're
Yes.
good. Yep, go right ahead.
Right. Hello, and hello, everybody, the panelists and other attendees. Obviously, COVID created a number of challenges for our business. Food and beverage in particular was pretty much devastated as a result of it. We were in the event business with golf events and other events, weddings and of the such. We've basically lost all that business at least through September, and the reality is it's probably gone for the rest of the calendar year. In light of that, we look to repurpose some of the facility, and we were fortunate to have a outdoor patio space that is wide open, fully licensed and all. And and it was just kind of by circumstance that we had a local restaurant that was had a fire with a piece of equipment, and so Two Jerks Barbecue is setting up shop here. Things happened very, very rapidly over probably a 2-week period. There were a lot of challenges, though. I mean, we had some tables, for instance, outdoors, and to go and buy tables is very difficult to do. We were able to locate a source for that, but that was a challenge. You're fighting the weather when you're outside. We began operating last Wednesday, and we basically lost Thursday because of the weather. There does seem to be a certain amount of hesitation in the public right now. It doesn't seem like people, we expected it to be a little bit busier than we were in light of the fact that there's limited outdoor space overall, and not everybody's able to reopen, but there does seem to be some hesitation. Some of it I'm not sure is because the perception is that reservations are required when in fact they're not in Massachusetts. And just everybody's different. Some people are very tentative and hesitant to remingle. There's word that next week, middle of next week, indoor dining will be allowed. No official word on that yet. Obviously, the challenge is there also with a limited capacity, no bar activity. So it has been a challenge. Again, we're fortunate because we've got the outdoor space and we've got a nice environment. We have not had to deal with converting a parking lot or putting up a tent in the parking lot and of the such. But the public does seem to be a little hesitant right now, and we'll see if that improves over the next few weeks. Again, we had to redefine our business. We're basically running a restaurant now, on a 2-week notice, and we're trying to get the word out you know, and all this social media and whatnot. And it's a little been a little slower than I would have hoped it would have been, but that could change rapidly too after just a short period of time. So again, there's challenges out there. It was mentioned earlier by one of the panelists that the prediction is upwards of 40% of businesses are going to not survive this, and I think that might be lowball even. But you know, hopefully it's not the case. So that's about all I have. Be glad to answer any questions anyone might have.
So Mark, what have been some successes or some real bright spots that you have maybe experienced thus far working with your town, or other things you've experienced that you didn't think would happen?
Yeah, we've again, we had a space that really was already covered, so we didn't have to deal with the parking lot tent and all that. I mean, the town's been supportive. We've been in communication with them. You know, there's so many rules and regulations. It's, you know, we do our best to oblige by as many of them. I do think it's consumer driven to some extent. You know, if people are comfortable doing things, then they do them. If they're uncomfortable, then they don't do them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, people are ecstatic to be outside, and you know, I mean, personally, my wife and I went down to Rhode Island, which, you know, they opened up outdoor dining a couple of weeks prior to Massachusetts, and it was it was so nice to sit outside and have a drink and have something to eat. People that come do feel that way, but I still, again, I think that you know, hopefully more people will you know, feel the that it's okay to do such things. We have plenty of spacing. It's outdoors. You know, it feels healthy when you're outside. But again, everybody's different, and everybody's approaching this differently.
If for those communities on our guest list right now, if you could provide them any like I guess recommendations or suggestions to help the business community in achieving greater success for those who have not really dived into everything thus far, what recommendations would you give them to make everything more streamlined and more conducive to the business community? Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you could give any type of suggestions or recommendations to our municipalities about how they could go about helping business a little bit more or to streamline things, what would you recommend?
Well, I think the approach is accurate right now. I mean, it was mentioned earlier by one of the panelists about you know, just kind of cutting through the red tape a little bit and, you know, picking things up. I mean, you know, what used to take 6 months to get permission for is, you know, I mean, common sense, I guess, is always always helps. But the you know, certainly streamlining some of the red tape and the you know, expediting the permitting process, as it were, is very helpful. You know, obviously lines of communication are important too. You know, I mean, the elected officials are residents of the town, and you know, nobody's going to benefit by red taping a business out of business. So you know, we're seeing that you know, there's certainly an increased level of cooperation with town agencies, and you know, more of a partnership feeling at this point than an adversarial position.
Okay, so flexibility is basically what you're asking for. So if the town's gonna be more flexible and streamlined, it would be a lot more helpful for business getting back to what they do best, which is business.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the hope is that this is, you know, we don't know what the new normal is going to be. I mean, you hear that term a lot, but you know, I mean, if this business level, you know, hopefully the level of business that businesses are allowed to do increases. But you know, so right now we're sort of in, you know, in a holding pattern, you know, survival mode, and you know, certainly it behooves everybody to keep businesses you know, keep businesses alive. You know, the town of Easton that I live in, we've got a really nice restaurant scene, and it's kind of sad to see, you know, so many places really struggling right now for no fault of their own either. So, you know, for the municipalities and whatnot to do whatever it takes to help those businesses stay afloat, I think we all win in the long run.
Most definitely. All right, well, Mark, thank you once again. From what I understand, those greens in Easton are some of the greenest around, so please visit his business.
Thank you.
If you don't golf, start golfing.
Yeah, no, golf. Fortunately, golf has been rather. It's been good. I mean, we were allowed to reopen in early May, and you know, at the time, it was kind of the only activity other than, you know, taking a walk, and so we've been fortunate on that end.
Well, we can go golf and then grab some food after. That would be fantastic.
That's the idea. That's what the message we're trying to get out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So now I'm going to transition back to Joanne, and she's going to close us out and start the Q&A session. So Joanne?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kate, Lee, and Mark. Before we move on to questions and answers, so actually if you've got any in mind, please start posting those either using the chat feature if you see that, or the Q&A button, and we'll get to those in a couple of minutes. First, I would like to introduce Mayor Robert Sullivan from Brockton, who has actually been able to join us today. Mayor, I think I've unmuted you. Can you hear us?
Hi, Joanne. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We were hoping that you can tell us a little bit about what Brockton's been up to. I've been told that you guys have been working on some ordinances to help businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to be business friendly, proactive. As you know, COVID-19 really hit our city of Champions extremely hard, 250 loss of lives. And of course, our businesses, a lot of them are mom and pops and have been here for generations. So I filed an ordinance, soon after COVID started hitting our community. It was endorsed by the Ward 2 City Councilor, Mr. Monahan, and the Ward 5 Councilor, Mr. Thompson. And it's funny because we filed that and it was in the queue. And then, of course, Governor Baker was allowing us to have outdoor dining until November 1st. So we've been very proactive. We have restaurants operating outside in Brockton, which is great. And last night, the ordinance committee, the 5 members out of the 11 sat, Councilor from Ward 1, Tim Cruz is the chairman, and they passed it unanimously back to the full council favorably. So the goal is to have it on the books permanently, and it will happen. And it's really a win-win for Brockton, for businesses. But right now, the whole purpose is to make sure that we adhere to the physical, social distancing guidelines, the medical standards, but also allow outdoor dining experience, allow waiters and waitresses and restaurant owners to make some money. So the synergy is real in Brockton right now, and we just got to continue to deal with the health ramifications, but also work very, very proactively to help our businesses. So I want to thank OCPC and, of course, Mary Waldron and you, Joanne, and Paul and Charlie and everybody over there, because, that's what you do every day. I'm biased because I'm from Brockton, and you're right across the street from me, so you're helping the city, but you're also helping neighboring communities just as strongly. So thank you, and kudos to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for joining us today. All right, so I'm now going to open it back up to questions. We've got a few that have come in, so give me 1 second to just look through the list here. All right, so we've got one, and I think, Paul, I'm going to start with you. The question is, with these projects that take up outdoor space, some encroach on the travelway, how is the impact on delay and traffic or rerouting pedestrian crossings taken into account when planning these projects, even if they're just temporary?
Well, I guess we have to really look at it on a case by cases. Not one size is going to fit all. If the right of way is too restricted to have outdoor dining and other elements in the travel lane, then maybe you got to think of something else. The best thing we can do is really just go out and do it. I mean, we're just going to have to be really flexible on this. I mean, it's a new situation. Maybe this is the time to really think about, do we really, is traffic throughput the end all be all? I mean, in a lot of cases, we're seeing that it's not. It actually has a negative effect if we just constantly moving cars around. So I think we really have to just be really flexible and start thinking out of the box. I mean, COVID-19 kind of, gave us a sucker punch, and now we got to be able to move with it. And that flexibility is going to be key for us to come roaring back, which I think we can do. So another thing too is, keeping those key performance indicators, or the KPIs for those who like acronyms, is going to be key to see if maybe later on, once you try these temporary design elements, if they need to be, if they should become permanent. So that's another aspect I strongly encourage our communities that embark upon these temporary design elements, is keep track of how they're being used, how many people are utilizing them, keep an eye on traffic flow, as one of the questions was asked, and seeing how everything's interfacing, because those would be key data points that you can use to decide whether or not these should be instituted for the long term, or instituted during certain times of the year, or not at all. So.
Great, thank you, Paul. Kate or Lee, I'm wondering if you guys have anything to add to that question.
I will, just quickly. I mean, everything Paul said is exactly right. I mean, I think that, as is always the case when we're doing road or street projects, it's a balance. There are a lot of uses you want to get in, and there's only so much width. So in some ways, it's the same process that we usually go through when we're trying to decide how to allocate right-of-way. Just in this case, there is, I think, a real urgency around time. And also, traffic volumes are down, so we do have more flexibility than we often have. So I think it's a matter of picking the right streets and being flexible and understanding that uses have changed a bit and that we may need to prioritize different things.
Great, thank you. Lee, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that covered it.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Next question is for Mr. Minsky. So the question is, someone is wondering if you have an impression of what % of customers that are coming now are tourists or visitors versus local residents, and if that's changed from before COVID times. Oh, Mark, you're still muted. There you go.
Okay, tourists, I would say altogether about 0. I mean, it seems to be mostly a local population that's coming, maybe, within a few town radius. But I don't see, we got no indication that people are traveling any great distances either.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me see, next question here. We've got, somebody has asked where you can find the design guide that Paul was speaking about on this webinar. So that is on the OCPC website, and we'll be posting that via the email that we send out later this afternoon. Similarly, somebody has asked about what the grant website is that Kate has talked about. We'll also share that with everybody in the email that we send out this afternoon. But if you Google MassDOT shared streets, I'm pretty sure it comes out as #1. So you can look at that as soon as you get off this webinar as well. Let me see what else we've got here. We've got a question for Kate. Can the new MassDOT program be used for design, that is, new street lining plans?
So I guess I have to reveal my ignorance. I'm not, do you like striping plans? So, but yes, the short answer is yes. We are trying to be flexible ourselves, not just in kind of how we think about streets, but how we kind of do our processes and what we allow our money to be used on. We want the money to be used to fund every step of the way to get one of these things up and running, so whatever it takes. We are also going to be making technical assistance resources available to any municipality who might need or want them. They're all funded by the Bar Foundation through a sort of public nonprofit partnership that we've put together for this. And those resources will be there to help cities and towns conceive of project ideas that would be good applicants. So yes, our money can be used, and there also will be other resources kind of outside of the grant monies that can be used as well.
Great, thank you, Kate. Another question has come in asking about contact details for panelists. We'll share those in the email that we send this afternoon. There is a question from somebody about wanting to know more specifically about the ordinance that's been filed in Brockton. So actually, I'm going to see if Rob May, who is the Director of Planning for the City of Brockton, is able to answer that question. Rob, I'm going to allow you to talk. Can you hear me, Rob?
I can hear you now. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. So somebody would like to know a little bit more detail about the ordinance that the mayor was talking about for helping businesses in the city of Brockton.
Okay, there's two things that are going on right now. First of all, under the governor's executive order and reopening for stage 2, the mayor has issued an order locally that is allowing local businesses to amend their common victualers and their alcohol licenses to be able to serve outdoors, and this is during the COVID crisis. So that's a temporary fix. But what the mayor is talking about is an ordinance that we introduced very early on in his reign, administration, excuse me, that's a better word, that will permanently allow first of all, restaurants as a by right use rather than needing a special permit, but is also going to allow outdoor dining as an allowed use. Our existing ordinance didn't necessarily allow outdoor dining. So this will make that what is now a temporary fix under the COVID crisis a permanent fix. And that outdoor dining includes not only applications for existing patios or taking over private parking areas, but we are accepting applications for parklets. So someone could build in the public right of way. Our sidewalks are narrow, but if we were to expand into the on-street parking lane, we might be able to expand the diners participate, more people participating in outdoor dining. To help fund those improvements, the Brockton Redevelopment Authority is working with Mass Hires Greater Brockton and has a small grant program out there for up to $10,000 per business. While that's available for all businesses, folks that are interested in outdoor dining could certainly take advantage of that. And then we will also be applying to MassDOT as soon as the grant round opens for this shared streets program that could also not only improve bike lanes, but also provide some money to help small restaurants with their parklet and outdoor dining activities.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Joanne, before Rob goes, there's a chat question about historic districts. Maybe Rob wants to step in, and then I'll step in after that.
Yeah, sounds great. So the question is, how are your historic district commissions responding to outdoor dining and retail strategies? Are there any discussions by commissions to allow temporary signage and structures without historic commission approval?
The less they know, the better.
This is being recorded, Rob.
This is a national emergency, and temporary is temporary. It's just that.
And that would be the same thing in Plymouth. So all of downtown Plymouth is our historic district, and the same thing. It's all temporary. Nothing has even been commented yet for a review. And as temporary seating, temporary signage, none of it has gone through a historic district commission review.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Lee. All right, I'm going to move back to Kate. There's a question for you here. Do we need to submit any pictures or proposed plans with the application?
Yeah, so the application asks for some sort of illustration of what the project is going to be. They don't have to be stamped plans. In fact, we don't want stamped plans. We're looking for things that are more informal than that. But yes, some sort of visual representation of the site and the kind of major elements, stores, restaurants, bus stops, crosswalks, and then a sketch of what is going to happen. We would like to see, yes.
Great, thank you, Kate. Another question here, how do we accommodate for ADA individuals when we're planning these sorts of initiatives? Paul, maybe over to you.
Yes, so you got to really, when you're setting up your temporary design, just keep ADA in mind. I mean, the guidelines are out there for ADA compliance in regards to, widths of certain, a passage and stuff of that nature. Just keep that in mind when you're doing that. For example, like having your outdoor dining in the parking lanes will help achieve keeping, business out of sidewalks and stuff of that nature. Things like shared paths, where you take over a travel lane, just themselves is going to be is going to help those who will be in mobility, help with mobility devices, just have a nice wider path just to transverse, but also make sure you consider the transition from the right of way back onto the sidewalk where need be, and there's also all types of different things you can buy to help individuals mount the curbs, like temporary ramps and stuff like that. So just when you're going forward in your temporary design, just make sure you have ADA in your thoughts, so that way you can tackle that problem.
This is Kate. I'll add also that our application requires municipalities to certify that their design meets ADA and access board requirements, even on a temporary basis.
Paul, there was a follow-up question to what you've said. What about tents over these areas?
Tents over the areas in regards to ADA or
I'm not sure. The question.
So I guess, in regards to a tent, I mean, I'm sure a tent is going to help improve the quality of the experience, especially on really warm days when the sun's quite intense, or if there may be, some residual like rain or sprinkles or something like outside. So it's.
Oh, Paul, I think you've frozen. Yep, I think we've lost Paul. Jack, if you'd like to clarify that question, please send in another one and we'll get back to you on it. Lee, I'm going to throw this one over to you, I think. Somebody would like to know how local Board of Health officials are reacting to outdoor dining / communal dining. Also, how are municipalities taking care of litter and cleaning?
So for litter and cleaning so far, it's the responsibility of the vendors, and we have not had an issue yet with that. Again, when I mentioned earlier, the town manager and the select board have really set a tone in Plymouth to say, let's make this happen. So the Board of Health, I think they've been great in the permitting and the process that we've been working with, and as flexible as possible. So far it's been a fairly easy process to get Board of Health approval for that outdoor eating, outdoor seating. Their concern is making sure that you have the 6 foot of separation, or if you're in an enclosure, a tent with sides. That's, I think, something that you can't do yet because it's considered more of a structure. But again, I think the Board of Health in Plymouth has been as flexible as possible to get these businesses up and running.
Great. Next question, public space. All right, I might throw this one out to you, Lee, as well. What considerations are being given to the allocation of public space to specific private businesses? Probably only an issue if the accommodations are contemplated as continuing beyond the COVID crisis.
Yeah, so for now, it's really what's in front of your business or what's visible from a window in your business. If you have 2 restaurants side by side, then it would be each restaurant would get their frontage. We do have a few cases where you have buildings with a clear view a few feet down the sidewalk. So in one case in particular I can think of, it's called Cork and Table, right, in downtown. They've extended their seating along the sidewalk in front of the old Colony Club, which is a private club that doesn't need that outside door seating. So I think, again, it's case by case, but yeah, and we'll see what happens next year and how well this goes. They're already talking about trying to do a seasonal one-way traffic flow already, and we don't even know how that's going to work yet because we haven't done it. But yes, I do see this as a great experiment that might extend into future years.
Thank you, Lee. Coming back to tents, so the question asked before was in regards to securing the tents from wind, looking at the size, fire rating. Yeah. Somebody else has sent in a comment that says that the Division of Professional Licensure and the Department of Fire Services are sending out detailed guidance soon for the permitting and use of tents for outdoor dining. So that will be a resource to turn to. Mark, I'm wondering, how do you guys go about dealing with tents? Are you using tents, or is it just tables and umbrellas? And what are you looking for when you're trying to decide whether they're appropriate or not in terms of wind resistance and fire ratings?
Well, we're using umbrellas.
Yeah.
Again, like so many things that are hard to come by, we've got most of our tables covered with umbrellas. We looked into tents. It's a huge capital expense for something that we hope is a temporary situation too. But we're using the umbrellas, but it's, like as mentioned, it can be a sunny day and then all of a sudden it gets too windy and we have to bring them down. So wind is always an issue with, umbrellas, and certainly even with tents too. So that was a valid question somebody raised about the securing a tent, because they can be, they can turn into a kite real quickly, if not, but we're using umbrellas at this point.
Great, thank you, Mark. Lee, I'm going to pass this one over to you. what's the requirement for access to bathroom facilities?
So I don't know, and I have not dealt with that myself yet. So I don't have an answer. That's not something I have dealt with.
Okay, thanks, Lee. So I think I'm going to put this one to you, Lee. I think you've already answered it. Somebody is asking if there is a plan to close some streets to allow more outdoor space for restaurants. I know, Lee, you talked about the difficulty of that because it eliminates parking spaces, but maybe there's a couple of latecomers to the webinar. Would you just kind of quickly summarize that again?
Sure. So in Plymouth's example, and that's the one I'm familiar with, is if we close down Court Street and Main Street, the first thing is people with limited mobility and how they can get to various venues on the downtown. Second problem is right now a large part of the business of many of the businesses downtown, the restaurants, is curbside pickup. So doing that closing may eliminate that option for curbside pickup. The third issue we have is once you eliminate that parking, there are several one-way streets with a significant amount of public parking there. And by doing that, you would eliminate the majority of off-street parking that's available in the downtown too. All of things we can deal with, but there are issues that we have to think about a little more before we ever do that. So again, I think right now it's an incremental approach. We're doing the sidewalk seating now. We're looking next week to start to do one-way traffic flow and expand the seating areas and put the walkways into where the parking was. And then the next phase will be, and then we're already talking about it, but looking at that closure of some streets. But at this point, there are a lot of challenges to that.
Thank you, Lee. All right, thank you, Lee, Kate, Mark, Paul, for joining us on this webinar. We do have a few questions that have come through that we haven't had time to answer today. Paul's details are on the screen right now. Please reach out to Paul and he will answer what he can or pass it off to somebody who will be able to answer it. Once again, the email that will go out this afternoon will include a link to the guide that Paul discussed, panelists' contact details, as well as more information and a link to the grant that Kate was talking about. So once again, thank you all for joining us on this webinar. Have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.